You're working just the way you always have, maybe even better. You're more experienced, handling tasks with ease. Then it starts. Your opinion's no longer relevant. You're always overqualified. Suddenly, you're unemployable. This isn't part of aging, it's ageism. Everyone deserves to age without limits. Let's make it a reality. Ageism. Notice it, challenge it, change it. Search Age Without Limits.
Welcome to this week's episode of Retirement Rebel Life After 60 with me, Siobhan Daniels. This week I'm speaking to the old bird in a boat, Sian Davis. She tells me how she got that name, as well as her big plan to be the oldest woman to row anti-clockwise around mainland UK, with a team of women in their late 50s and 60s. She tells me that she's proud to be one of only 6 women who were over 60 at the time to have rowed the Atlantic Ocean. She also told me that when she's not on a boat, she's a keen motorcyclist, owning a selection of bikes, including a Harley and a Triumph Thunderbird. But before we hear from Sian, please subscribe, follow, rate and share with friends if you like it. Welcome to Retirement Rebel Life After 60. I'm your host, Siobhan Daniels. Join me on a journey to meet inspiring rebels who've redefined retirement. Together, we'll explore new passions, triumphs over challenges, and discover the vibrant possibilities of life after 60. This is about living boldly, not just aging. So, are you ready to rebel? Last week, I spoke to Alex Rotas, who was a joy to speak to about how we actually age, as opposed to how society seems to depict the way they think we should be aging. She takes umbrage, and so do I, with people who think that they're complimenting you by saying that you look younger than you are. That, as she explains in her film Older, is actually ageist language. Her work shows that we are actually an increasingly active and healthy population. She told me that she wanted to show her work so that many of us are comfortable with how we're aging and how we look. She documents that very skillfully in her photography and films. If you've not heard the podcast, then please do check it out. It's available on all podcast platforms. My guest on the podcast is Sian Davies. Now, she calls herself Old Bird in a Boat, and I absolutely love that. I met Sian not so long ago at an adventure festival, and I wanted so much to talk to her as soon as I heard her say, do you know what? I want to become the oldest woman next year to row round the UK. So I just thought, she's my kind of woman. I've got to get her on this podcast. So I'm absolutely thrilled that you've agreed to be on it this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Siobhan. I mean, the more of us that get the message out there about positive ageing for us old birds, then the better. So thank you for inviting me.
And I love the fact that you call yourself an old bird and sort of own being old, because people seem to shy away from it so much. And I'm trying to reclaim it and say, old is good, old is positive. I don't have to bung young in there. I'm not young at heart, I'm old at heart. So I loved it when I heard you say old bird in a boat. Yeah,
I completely agree with you. I mean, I think there are plenty of messages about the fountain of youth and how wonderful it is to be young and what have you. But, you know, let's face it, we're an ageing population. There's a lot of us older people out there that are just doing amazing things, but we're not always heard of. So from, you know, my point of view, I'm delighted you're doing this podcast. Let's positively claim the fact that, yes, we're getting older, but my goodness, we're doing life.
I know, we are doing life. There are so many of us in our 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s and beyond who are ageing with vigour. We really are, aren't we?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, we'll talk about your rowing in a moment, but first of all, let's go back and sort of talk about your childhood and growing up. What kind of childhood did you have? Were you an adventurous spirit then?
Oh, gosh. Well, I grew up in the countryside back in the 60s in the Mendip Hills in Somerset. So we were in isolation. So my childhood was spent running around with my dog exploring because, you know, there wasn't anyone else I could play with nearby. So I created my own sort of adventures on a day-to-day basis. So I think that was probably quite a good foundation, really, because I was climbing trees and making bows and arrows and, you know, doing all the sorts of stuff that slightly feral, I suppose you'd call it these days. But for me, it gave me a good grounding.
Yeah, that's like my childhood. It was great, just getting out there.
Exactly. And you know, I feel sorry for kids these days that don't get that chance to be slightly feral unless you do a woodfolk school or something like that. kids love nothing better, actually, than grubbing around outside. But, there's almost so much of a sense of safety these days and fear that's so much induced by the media. Kids don't always get the chance to do that sort of thing. And it's sad.
So did you go into an adventurous career?
No, not really. I was always quite active. I went to university, didn't really know what I was doing afterwards.
What did you study at university?
I started out doing law. But anyway, I ended up lifeguarding for a bit, for want of anything better to do. Sort of quite enjoyed that environment, working in sport and leisure, and I just stayed and carried on working my way up the greasy pole. So I've always been involved in managing facilities and doing programming, and a lot of my focus is on working with older people and actually, come the end, post-menopause women, doing activities for them, which was a bit sort of innovative in its day.
Mm.
And then I went into health promotion, which was specifically around getting older people more active to reduce coronary heart disease and that sort of thing. So I've always had an interest in being active and seeing the benefits, not just for me, but firsthand, in terms of social inclusion, reducing isolation, plus all the physical benefits that go with it. So I've always been active and always felt it was a good thing to do and try and embrace and encourage other people to do.
I think historically, a lot of people, when they were ageing, tended to be quite sedentary, didn't they?
Well, it's the pressure that society puts on you. Once you reach 60, it's as if everything just has to shut down. And not that there's anything wrong with this, but put your slippers on, get your cardigan on and sit on the settee with a cup of cocoa. That's got its place. But for goodness sake, we're still active and fit and healthy enough to really embrace life and just do amazing things, big and small, and just enjoy the body that we have that still works. And, obviously bits start getting a little bit cronky and cranky, but you work around that.
Yeah, I've taken 2 black Labradors for a walk today, and my knees are a long walk in the countryside, and my knees are going, excuse me?
Yeah,
Can
exactly.
we rethink this walk?
Absolutely. We've all got these weird and wonderful little aches and pains, and they do seem to accumulate a bit more as you get that bit older, but there is always something else you can do. And I think part of the message that you would want to get out, and I would want to get out, is that if part of you doesn't work particularly well, there's still something else you can do. For you, it might be going off on a motorhome adventure. For me, it might be cycling rather than rowing, or strength training or something. But there is always something else. Don't give up.
That's it. You can reframe your adventure, can't you? If one bit of your body gives up, you can think, right, what else can I do with another bit of my body?
Yeah, exactly that.
Now, in 1996, your life changed sort of a little bit, didn't it? I mean, how old were you around then?
I was 36. And yes, it did. It changed. And
why was that?
Well, my folks were living abroad at the time, my parents. I'm an only child. And I got a phone call when I was at work saying, pack your bags, your dad is dying. And it was the first I'd heard of it. My dad had throat cancer, and he wasn't expected to survive the surgery. As it happened, he did. And he managed to live probably another 5 years, but got dementia as well. And that plunged me straight into a caring role with Dad, and then my mum, who needed help too because she went into depression trying to look after my dad, who post-surgery was in quite a state. Then after 5 years, my dad died, and then my mum's health got a lot worse. And so it was a start of trying to combine a career with looking after elderly parents, which is not uncommon for a lot of women and men, but mainly women, let's say.
So that's when you sort of put yourself on the back burner, isn't it? Or any ideas of adventures and things?
It was a gradual sort of drip, drip, drip effect of being able to do less and less and less, to the point where probably 4 or 5 times I tried to go away to do things. And I remember being in a bunkhouse up on the west coast of Scotland. I'd managed to get a sea kayaking trip. And I got to the most remote part of west coast of Scotland, and suddenly my phone went bananas, and my mum had pressed her alarm, her emergency alarm at home, 500 miles away.
Oh, no.
And it transpired she'd pressed it by mistake, but it meant that I ended up going home. And there were many times when I had to abort little adventures when Mum would go into hospital, or Dad would be, emergency blue lighted into hospital. And in the end, it's like, when they train elephants, some mahouts got the elephant on a bit of rope nailed to a stake in the ground, and it learns not to go anywhere because it can't. And then when finally the ropes loosened, the elephant doesn't go anywhere because it thinks it can't. And that was sort of almost how it was for me. I learned not to try and go anywhere because every time I did, guaranteed there'd be some emergency or another, and I had to get pinged back. So my world got smaller and smaller.
And how was that for you?
Very frustrating, very frustrating. But until I reached my sort of mid-50s, I could cope with it. But then I started realising, hey, you're getting older, and I'm giving my life to what was then my one elderly parent. And I felt that frustration of wanting to do so much, recognising that I was getting older, that my own window of opportunity would start to change or get smaller. So I got increasingly frustrated with it. And it's such a common story for carers that, you have to put your life on hold for someone else. And you do reach a point where you think, oh, God, I've got to do something about this. How do I get my life and some of my ambitions into these circumstances without the detriment of the other?
Well, you say that. You think you've got to do this, what can I do? But a lot of women stay in that place of just isolation, belief that they can't do it. Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I know definitely you're trying to do. Get out there and encourage women to find that spark again, have their adventures whilst they can, whilst they physically and mentally can.
Yes, absolutely. And they might only be small adventures. I'm going to put a plug in here for the likes of Belinda Kirk. Belinda's been all over the world doing the most amazing adventures. She set up something called Explorers Connect, but she's got a child now. So her adventure world is sort of changed, So she does little adventures and she encourages other people to go out and do small adventures. It might only be a night camping in the wild or in the garden or whatever it is. Just do little things that keep that spark alive.
It makes you feel alive.
Yes. And so that when you've got the freedom to go off and do stuff, you can just go. But you can get out of the habit. You can close down and you've got to keep that dream going, as frustrating as it might seem.
I like the fact that she started a community, because I think that is one thing I've noticed. There's a growing tribe of women, especially in their late 50s and 60s and going on to 70s,
Absolutely.
who are looking out for each other, supporting each other, recognising that we can empower each other and have these. I see the smile on your face as I'm saying that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's brilliant.
You're right. There is a growing tribe of us, and there are now a number of organisations for women. I have to say there's sort of predominantly, I think, younger women, which is great because they're going to get older one day. But it's important that us older women stick together and show the positivity of how you can age and still really enjoy life and just, grab every chance to have that little bit of a challenge to keep ourselves stretching as we get older. So yes, it is growing.
Talking about stretching yourself as you get older, when you were in your 50s, you had a herniated disc, you were waiting for an operation.
Yeah.
And then you start getting a crazy idea in your head.
Yeah, I'm trying to think when this was now. It's 2017, that's right. And I was a rower at this point. I'd started something which I would highly recommend to any woman. It's called Pilot Gig Rowing. It's Cornish Pilot Gig Rowing. So I was rowing these big old rowing boats.
I've not heard of that.
Oh, look it up. Cornish Pilot Gig Rowing. It's a fantastically passionate, sociable, gutsy sport. The gender split is actually 50-50 men and women, and a lot of older women row and compete. It's all around the Cornish, Devon, Dorset, partly Essex coastline, even in London.
How did you get into that?
So I was in Bristol, living in Bristol at the time. Of course, Bristol's got a harbour area. And I remember seeing these sort of funny-looking boats. They're 31 foot long. They're beautifully sleek-looking boats. And I thought, I must find out about that. And so I just went for a trial row, absolutely smitten straight away. It was just such a lovely thing to do, to be on the water and feel your body really working and being outside. But now, since then I started sea rowing. I moved from Bristol and moved down to North Devon. And there is such a magical feeling to being with a group of peers, women your own age, being on the sea, watching the sun setting, watching the fish jump, seeing the seal, watching the gulls going overhead off to roost at night. It's magical.
Oh, it sounds fabulous.
I really recommend it to any woman in her 50s and beyond, or younger. But it's a sport that you can age well with and keep on going and competing into your 70s and even 80s. Fantastic sport. To answer your original question, I do go off on a tangent because I'm a bit of a rowing nerd.
No, I love it. I could listen to you forever. I love your enthusiasm and that you're searching out all these different types of physical adventures and that you're an advocate for older women. This is the community that I'm trying to gather on this platform.
Well, it's sharing your enthusiasm for someone. It's hopefully a little bit infectious, isn't it? I am passionate about rowing. I'm passionate about doing it. I have some amazing women who are in their 60s and 70s and they didn't come to rowing till quite late like me. But by God, they've learned. I didn't think I was competitive until I started gig rowing. Oh my goodness, it brings out the feistiness in you. And why can't us women be feisty as we get older? You know, I know that poem about, wearing the red hat and scraping your umbrella along the railings.
Oh, I love that.
Exactly. It feels a little bit like that for me. It's growing old and being feisty, but I'm competitive. And why ever not? Why do we have to shrivel up?
Well, what did Muriel Gray, the Scottish writer, what did she say about female adventurers in particular?
She wrote a book calling something along the lines of Munro bagging, without a beard. Adventure isn't just for men. It's for women too.
You don't have to have a beard to have adventure or something, she said, didn't she? Yeah. Exactly
that, yeah. So I was laid up in 2017. I herniated a disc in my back, lost the use of my right leg,
Gosh, that must have been frightening.
Well, I knew what it was, thankfully. I knew it was a disc. So it was frightening, but it meant I had to wait for surgery. And in that time, I was very much incapacitated, bedbound, couldn't even get out. I had to crawl to the kitchen to get food, that sort of thing. So it was extremely painful. And I knew that probably like a lot of us over the years, you've learned a lot of maybe development stuff, or I trained in NLP years ago, and I knew I had to keep myself motivated and thinking forward. So I started reading about women adventurers, and I came across a few women who'd rowed oceans, for example, Ros Savage, Sarah Ooten, and it really inspired me. I thought, right, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get my surgery out of the way and I'm going to row an ocean.
Just remind me, how old were you at the time?
Well, I was at that time 57, but it took me a while.
So you're 57, you can't walk, you're waiting for major surgery and you think, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to row the Atlantic.
It's a bit of an odd one, isn't it? Yeah. I suppose it does seem odd, but then when you read the books that these women have written, Ros Savage, amazing. She's now become an MP. That was her ambition. So she's moved on. I think she's, late 50s now, 60. I may be doing her a disservice. But she's gone on to become an MP. But she rowed several oceans. She was one of the first, if not the first woman to do it, back in the early 90s. And you read her books and you think, God, these are ordinary people. They're ordinary women. Sarah Ooten, an amazing woman. She rowed around the world. The bits that she couldn't row, she cycled. And the bits that she couldn't cycle, she sea kayaked. And, you don't get to hear about these people. You get to hear about Bear Grylls or James Cracknell. There are women doing amazing things. And they're just ordinary women.
Yeah.
So when you read these books and you think, hang on, these are ordinary people. They've done it. Yeah, I can do it.
Oh,
and
I love it.
It's not easy, but you're inspired.
So after your surgery, how long did it take you before you actually embarked on that rowing adventure?
Yes. So it took me 4 years from having the idea to do it to actually doing it. And part of that is because ocean rowing, it's a very costly thing to do unless you know the shortcuts. So a lot of it for me was spending time going off as soon as I could drive again. I was off meeting women who were ocean rowers or who'd rowed around Britain, like Leslie Foden, who's in her early 60s now. And it took that time to research how to do it. And then I came across a company that actually had built a new boat, and they were doing a sort of train with us and you can pay a price and go and do the Atlantic. So that's how I did it ultimately. If you have to buy your own boat and all your kit and what have you, you need to raise an awful lot of money. So I was in that process. I'd actually found a crewmate to go with. We had the boat. Long story short, it didn't happen. So, it can be a bit tricky getting all of that going, but there is this company that you can go to. There's a couple now actually where you can actually just pay the money, do the training with them and go and do the row. And that's what I ended up doing.
Was it just you and another in the boat?
No, there were 12 of us in a 39-foot boat.
Oh, my goodness. And how was that for everybody getting on?
Really interesting psychologically, because, and this is where I think your maturity helps. You know, you've been around the block a bit. You're used to dealing with people in all sorts of ways. I mean, everyone was super polite to start with because we knew we were all literally in the same boat and we had to get on with it. And, you know, you're tired. I'm not going to paint a good picture of ocean rowing now, but believe me, it gets better. You're knackered. You're hallucinating. You're trying to get used to the sleep deprivation.
Were you seasick?
I was seasick for, I think it was, I was out of it completely for about 15 days. All I could do was row.
Oh, my goodness.
So I rowed, I collapsed. I didn't eat at all. Couldn't eat. Just couldn't eat anything. But there was no space for me to be ill, really. So I had to get on with it. So I just rowed, collapsed for 15 days. And I think my first meal was a nibble of a ginger nut biscuit.
Do you know, the body is a remarkable thing, isn't it? And the mind that gets you through those things.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to finish it?
We took 42 days. We thought we were going to take about 30, but we didn't. And climate change, and I mean, I could bore everyone for this for ages, but we didn't get the winds or the currents that we were supposed to get crossing the Atlantic. You know, everything is changing now. Our tides and our winds are changing. And so we took a lot longer than we thought we were going to do.
You were one of only, 6 women over 60 that had done that at the time?
Yeah, at the time. This is 2021. I'm not aware. Could be that maybe 1 or 2 more have done it, but I'm not sure they have. So yes, one of only 6 at the time.
How important was it for you to show a woman in her 60s has done this amazing adventure?
Absolutely vital. And the reason for that is I suppose I'm not a particularly radical feminist, but I think I grew up in an era when women weren't allowed to do things. I remember at university going along to a talk on joining the University Air Corps, and I thought, this is great. Oh, yes, there was, you know, these chaps telling me I can get my private pilot's license. And I thought, yeah, that's just what I want to do. So we were invited at the end of the talk to come up and put our names down if we wanted to sign up. And I said, I'd love to. And they said, sorry, love, you're a girl, but you can stay in the clubhouse and make tea for us for when we come back. So my whole life has been kicking against that sort of stuff. I've always been in careers that have been male orientated. So for me to showcase the fact that a woman in her 60s can do something that's seen as being what James Cracknell and Ben Fogle might do, I love it.
Do you think you got the recognition you deserved at the time?
I think I felt at the time slightly, well, very much invisible. Being older and being a woman, it's like a double whammy. Because I think you know, we get written off as we get older. You finish work, you sort of lose your identity. And that's another thing I feel really passionate about. If you're retired, this is when things really grow and change for you because you're able to do the things you never were able to do.
Well, I'm shouting from the rooftops. I say, when you retire, you refire. We're refiring.
Yeah, lovely. I love that.
You know, I'm not retiring, I'm refiring.
Absolutely right.
And I find that when I say that to women and their faces light up, it just almost seems to switch on a light bulb. They think, do you know what? I am going, and I love the fact that I'm having that impression on people.
Yeah, no, I love that phrase. Absolutely, retire.
Use it,
refire.
Shout it from the. I say we age with vigour, and when we retire, we refire, and when we age, we don't beige into the background. Those are all my phrases.
No, I love all of that stuff. It's about putting that positive message out there, and hopefully inspiring other women that you can just give stuff a go. You know, if it doesn't work out, that's fine. Do something else. And you know, we're privileged when we're retired. You know, to have that bit more time, usually a little bit more money, to just give stuff a go rather than. I don't want to sound negative about this. You know, if someone wants to be at home and just sit and settee, that's great. But for those that have got, you know, want to carpe diem life, there's so much opportunity available to us now.
I'm just going to interrupt for a moment to shamelessly plug my book, Retirement Rebel. It's published by Vertebrate Publishers, and it's my honest account of feeling broken in my 50s and finding my happy place in my mid-60s. I got rid of my home and possessions and hit the road in my motorhome for a roller coaster ride along life's adventures. I wanted to help younger women not to fear ageing and older women to grab life and run with it. You can purchase a copy in most bookstores and on Amazon. Right, now back to the conversation. Did it change your mindset after you'd done the Atlantic, do you think?
Yes.
Did it make you feel more empowered, more confident, or more feisty to get the word out there that older women are doing these things?
Yes, to get the message out there that older women are doing that stuff. For me personally, I came back feeling, right, I'm not going to capitulate or give in as easily as I normally do. I'm not going to people please as much as I did. I'll have my boundaries will be firmer. And I have to keep reminding myself of that because, you've got years of conditioning to overcome, particularly as women, that, you're the carer, you're the giver, you're the one who, I'm going to say something very controversial now, but if you see an older couple out in the car, who's always driving? It's always the husband. Women, drive your own car,
This is what I'm trying to get them to get out in their vans, because a lot of couples have got vans and they sit on the driveway if the fella can't be bothered, he doesn't want to go that weekend, but many of the women want to go. So again, there's an increasing number of van groups of older women who are driving the vans and meeting up and encouraging each other, and I love seeing that.
Yeah.
You're not always on water though, are you? When you're not on water, you're sort of going out and about underground.
Yeah, there's lots of things I like doing. I used to climb, don't do that really anymore, but I came across this a lovely organisation called, I think they're called Love Her Wild.
Oh yes, I know them. Yeah. Fabulous.
And there was another one called Adventure Queens. I think they're both still going.
Yeah, they are, very much so.
Yes, great. Well, I came across an advert a few years ago, come and try caving. I thought, I'm a bit claustrophobic, but I'd like to give it a go because I've not done it before. Absolutely loved it. And the woman who ran the session, Claire Vivian, ran the session over in South Wales in, I think, one of the UK's biggest caving networks. She was absolutely brilliant. So confidence-inspiring, so lovely and empathic. I was absolutely bitten by the bug. I loved it because it is like going into another world, and it's safe. You only go as far as your ability will let you, and if you've got a good instructor like Claire, there's no fear with it at all.
But you said you were claustrophobic when you embarked on it. Were you not scared at all? Because I know sometimes I can just even, if my quilt's too tight, my bedding's too tight, I go, oh, I get panicky. I don't know what it'd be like in a cave.
It's not for everyone. I mean, let's put it into context. A lot of caves are massive.
Yeah, but you've got to go through that narrow bit to get to them.
Yes, you do. And I suppose my thought process was thousands of people have been here, done this before. I'm with someone I utterly trust. I'm not on my own. I've got all the safety gear. We've got all the communications gear. I felt safe, and largely down to Claire and her leading. I felt completely safe. And yes, we did go through some amazingly tight spaces. There was one, it was like 2 ledges of rock, and all we could do was lie down between them. They went on about 80 feet and roll.
Oh, my goodness.
Roll sideways. I mean, this is going to make some people freak. I can understand it. But we rolled sideways and we just squeezed our shoulders in order to turn sideways and just roll our way along. And that was not on the first session, I have to say. But but again, you're in that moment. You just get on and do stuff. And I think it's that, that lovely quote of feel the fear and do it anyway.
I love it. I love that you're doing all these things. And you're a bit of a biker as well, aren't you?
Yeah, always have been. When I was in my youth, I was Bristol's only woman riding a big motorbike. And I have my gran to thank for that. My gran in the 1920s used to ride a BSA Sloper, 600 cc, yes, back in the 1920s. So she was a maverick, and I guess some of it's passed down in the genes.
It's all making sense now. It's all making sense. So it's not just a small motorbike. You've got 2 or 3. Just talk me through what kind of motorbikes you've got.
Okay, so my baby is my 1956 Triumph Thunderbird, which I've had since I was in those days when I was 17. My midlife crisis, if you want to call it that, was a Harley Davidson 1340 night train. And I want to do motorcycle touring with my little dog. So I bought myself a little BMW 650. Because if I put her on the Harley, it would frighten the life out of her because it's so noisy.
Oh, will she have little goggles on?
Yep, she'll have the goggles. She'll have the, I'm not sure how I'm getting her on the bike yet, but she'll probably have the kit.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, I can't wait to see the pictures of that and follow your adventures on that. So when your grandma was on her motorbike, I'm just intrigued by that. That must have been so unusual in that day.
Yeah, I didn't know my gran that well. I was just a teenager when she died. And I wish I'd got to know her more because I think she was quite an exceptional woman. Born in an era when, again, women didn't get these chances often. But there was something particularly feisty about her. She was tiny. She was only about 5'1". There was something special about her that ignited that spark to do something that just wasn't possible. So I don't know what that was. Wish I knew.
This is the thing. Through the generations, there's always been these women around, isn't it? It's just a case of getting your voices heard. And I really do feel that we are beginning to get our voices heard and to say, look, we're all out here. We're all aging like this. Stop writing us off and see that this, you know, when you're getting older, you can have the best years of your life.
Yes, exactly. It is. It's starting to, largely thanks to folk like you, Siobhan. I mean, I'm on the receiving end of this podcast. I'm just here doing the chatting. You're doing all the hard work of getting out there and making this happen. So, you know, thanks for you.
But you're also out there doing the adventures. You're an example. You're an inspiration. You're somebody that younger women can look up to. This is why I want this platform, because I want my retirement rebel tribe to show that we are doing it already. We're not just one exceptional woman that sort of hits the newspaper or something. There's an awful lot of us doing it, and we want to be seen and we want to be heard, and we want you to join us.
Exactly that. There's a lot more of us. There's a groundswell.
Yeah.
But we've been invisible till now, and thanks to the likes of yourself, we're starting to become much more visible and being clear about, you know, we're not the only ones.
No.
And anyone can do this stuff. Just get out there and give it a go. Talk to other women. You know, that's what got me rowing across the Atlantic. I talked to women who'd done it already. But would you find them in the press anywhere? No, not really.
Not enough. It's just that quirky
exactly.
story of this one quirky woman. And it's like, no, there's lots of us being quirky. Anyhow, you take me back to rowing there, saying rowing the Atlantic. Talk me through what's your next big adventure, because that's what ignited my interest in you when I got talking to you and you just casually mentioned, oh yes, I want to become the oldest woman to row around the UK.
Well, when I came back from the Atlantic, and everyone will say this, most of us say, oh, I'm not doing that again. Because in the moment, it's a bit of a rough experience.
Yeah, I ran a marathon when I was 53 and I was going to retire at the peak of my marathon career. And my daughter had other ideas and entered me for the London Marathon. So I ended up doing that at 55. But then I said, that's enough. So I know what you mean. When you finish one thing, you think, oh, never again.
Yeah, you do. So well done on doing the marathons.
Thank you.
Yes. So yes, I'd finished the Atlantic, thought I'm not going to do that again. Then after a while, something started niggling and I thought, do you know what? I don't remember. There was just not much wildlife to be seen on the Atlantic. It was just essentially blue sky, blue sea, 24/7. Well, apart from obviously the beautiful Milky Way at night. And I came back thinking I'd really like to actually see the UK coastline. I'd like to see wildlife and I'd like to see the coastline of the country that I've lived in all my life and actually have a different ocean rowing experience. And it doesn't have the same kudos. You know, if anyone's heard of ocean rowing, they've heard of the Atlantic Ocean Row. The UK coastline is magnificent, but it hasn't got the same exposure as an ocean row. But it's far more tricky because of the currents and the tides and the weather, and far more interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense really, does it?
No, I don't know. I don't know. We're funny, us humans. Sometimes we forget what's on our doorstep and we want to go off wandering afar when actually the most interesting stuff is right in front of our nose. So I wanted to see the UK coastline and I wanted a different sort of challenge because the Atlantic is amazing, but it's boring, if I'm really honest.
Yeah.
I'm going to put people off. It's an incredible experience, but the UK coastline is stunning, as we all know. And you get to see whales, you get to see dolphins, you get to see orca up off, you know, the Orkneys or the Scottish coast.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, I was up in the Orkneys. So beautiful.
Yeah, well, that's on my hit list.
Yay.
I've not got there yet, so you can inspire me there. So that was the seed of it started to grow after coming back from the Atlantic. So next year, I've actually put a crew together. Rather than paying an organisation, I wanted my own crew of people that I'd sort of interviewed and selected to be part of the crew, which is now what I have. So there are 6 women going, and I will be the oldest, but there will be another 4 women in their 50s, me, and then a young woman who's about 35, and a couple of chaps.
That's good to have the intergenerational mix.
Yes, and I think the sort of maturity of the older women will be just what's needed, actually, because round UK is particularly difficult. And it can take, you might think it will take 40 days, but it could take 80 or 90 because of the tides and the winds and having to sort of put the parrot anchor out and just stay sitting on the boat for a few days, doing nothing because you're in bad weather. So I think that maturity and that resilience that I think women get as they get older, that's a big theme of mine. I think we build an amazing resilience as we go through life, women. I think we're suited to that sort of thing.
You can dig deep. Yeah,
you dig deep and you just know that it's, one stroke after another for a million
just keep
strokes.
Going.
Just keep plodding on. You're not fast, but you're plodding.
Why on earth did you decide that you wanted to do it counterclockwise?
No one's done it before. Very, very simple.
Oh, great. So you'll be setting a record.
We hope to set a world record for going counterclockwise. And for me personally, I'm hoping to get at least 3, if not 4 records, of which that will be one.
Oh, what are the others?
Well, oldest person to do it, oldest woman to do it. We were due to go this year, but we didn't get the weather window we needed to go. And at the time, I'd injured my hand, ironically, on sea survival training.
Right.
So this is going to sound strange, but I was actually going to go for the first person to do it one-handed, because I could only use one hand. So we were actually training on the boat and I was rowing with one hand and everyone else is rowing with 2. And I thought, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it, whatever.
Yeah.
If I have to do it one-handed, I'm going to do it one-handed.
So when do you plan to be setting off and where are you going to set off from and how can people follow your journey?
Yes, so we'll be setting off from a little place called Eyemouth, which is on the east coast of Scotland, about 30-odd miles east of Edinburgh. It's a little fishing port. And we're going from Scotland because it's a row that's not normally done from Scotland going around UK. It's normally done from London. And we thought, well, we've got a Scottish skipper. The boat's in Scotland. Most of the crew, a lot of the crew are Scottish. So let's go from Scotland. So it's counterclockwise, first time ever done, and going completely around Britain. It's not the first time that would be done. There's a couple of people doing it at the moment that are around about day 80 because the weather's been so bad for them. But I mean, at the time, we were going to be the first from Scotland and the first counterclockwise.
How long do you think it's going to take you?
Oh, piece of string in a way. I mean, we think maybe 50 days. But, some of those days we could be just sitting on parrot anchor waiting for some rough weather to pass through. Could be 50, could be 60, could be 70. And all this is sounding almost superhumanly out in most people's reach. But I think part of the message I want to get across is, yes, this is a bit different, but there are ways of doing ocean rowing. You can just do small 3, 5, 7 day ocean rows off the Norwegian coast, around close to Scotland. There are easier ways to access it. You don't have to do a great big, huge challenge that's fairly expensive and very time consuming.
Now, one thing I'm dying to ask you, and it's really funny because people always ask me about the loo in my motorhome and what do you do? When there's 6 of you stuck on a boat going around, do you ever get off the boat? You're on the boat all the time. So how do you do your ablutions? And I'm presumably you get no privacy.
No, well, you try and carve out a little privacy to start with, but very quickly that goes, just because anecdotally and in my experience, quite often women are very daunted about the prospect of having a pee or something in front of someone else. That inhibition goes very quickly, which is extremely liberating.
Yeah.
So you start with a bucket. You have a bucket on the boat, and that bucket's tied on a piece of string so it doesn't disappear overboard like a lot of stuff can do unless it's tied down, and so you balance on a bucket.
And you just pass the bucket around.
And it's as simple as that. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I could get very technical.
No.
But let's not. Yeah, so essentially you just have a bucket. And in terms of washing, it's incredibly important that you keep your body as clean as you can, or the bits at contact with bits of the boat, because you get salt sores very, very quickly. after just a couple of days unless you get the salt off the contact points on your body. So you get incredibly creative with a sustainable wet wipe and a drop of water.
Fantastic.
101 uses for a wet wipe.
But one thing I love is that you're just such an advocate for people that adventure can start after 60.
And a very important message to get out, and it needn't be big adventure, it can just be starting small. And that's why I go back to the likes of Belinda Kirk and her being an ambassador for doing small adventures. You can tackle a lot of things when you're 60. Caving, okay, doesn't have to be physically demanding. It's not everyone's cup of tea. Motorbiking, even if, adventure motorbiking, the days of the big GS 1250 BMW motorbike are numbered. There's a lot of blokes don't buy them now because they're just too flipping big to take on an adventure ride. Little 400, 350cc, even 125s, they're not big. And actually, just because you're a woman doesn't mean to say you can't ride a big 1250 motorbike, but make life easier for yourself. There's nothing really that isn't accessible to women after 60 to give it a go and find someone who can teach you.
Yeah. Now, there's one question that I ask all my guests, but I feel like after speaking to you, it's pretty redundant because it's when's the last time that you felt rebellious or did anything rebellious? And it seems to me like you're just one big you're one of my retirement rebel tribe. But can you remember a specific occasion?
When I felt rebellious? Well, I think I'm going to go back to my early motorcycle days when I was the only woman doing it and the inspiration of my gran. So you're right, I've had a lifetime of being rebellious and doing the things that women aren't supposed to do. And that's meant my working life. I used to operate pool plant machinery in swimming pools in the days when it was all ex-naval men and women weren't allowed anywhere near the pool plant to flush the filters through. Oh, no, that's a man's job. And I kicked against it.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. Things have changed, but, there is still that sort of feeling there that you've got to work that bit harder to claim your place in doing stuff. So I think I've been a gentle rebel, but persistent rebel all my life.
Well, I'm so glad that you agreed to come on the podcast and talk. And I'm sure that you're going to be an inspiration to so many people out there who are listening to this podcast. Now, if anybody wants to follow your journey and keep in contact with you, really, how can they do that?
So there is an app called YB Races, which is a free app. And that app tracks rowing challenges. I think maybe sailing as well, but I'm interested obviously in the rowing stuff. We'll be on that, and you can what's called dot watch the boat as we go around the UK. So we'll be on that when we actually start, which we anticipate will be May. In the meantime, we have a Facebook page called Counter Navigate, and that's Navigate, not navigate spelt, Navigate GB, and also an Instagram page of the same name, Counter Navigate GB.
Brilliant. And I'll put all that information in the show notes from here. But thank you so much for talking to me. And I wish you a lot of luck. And I can't wait for you to break those records and just be an advocate for older women that are out there living life with vigour and ageing so positively.
Yeah, well, thank you, Siobhan, for doing what you're doing and raising the profile of women, ordinary women doing amazing things. Thank you so much.
Well, that was a wonderful conversation with Sian Davies. She's such an inspiration, and she's everything that I wanted this podcast to represent. She admits to losing herself when she was caring for her elderly parents. But then, in her mid-50s, things changed for her. She found rowing and her sense of adventure. And she also makes me see that we can have so much vitality as we age, with adventures, resilience, and even a strong competitive edge. A sense of just giving things a go, not holding back because of age, not thinking we're too old. We can feel alive and challenge ourselves in our 60s and beyond. It's not all about white middle-class males having adventures. There are many women out there who are doing very similar challenging things as the men. But unfortunately, they're not being showcased. And that's something that Sian told me she wants to change. And we want to hear their stories too here on Retirement Rebel Life After 60. So if you know anyone that's got a great story to tell and you think they'd want to tell it here on the podcast, please get them to get in touch via our website, retirementrebel.co.uk. We'd love to hear from them. Next week, my guest will be Dr. Carol Easton. She's the Chief Executive of the Centre for Ageing Well. And she chatted to me about what they're doing to tackle ageism in society. And she talks to me about how it's being received and how they're getting companies to sign up to an anti-ageism pledge. I hope you'll enjoy listening to it just as much as I enjoyed having the conversation with her. Thank you so much for joining me on today's Retirement Rebel Life After 60. I'm truly grateful for your time and your willingness to embark on this journey with me. If today's conversation sparks something within you, or if you've your own rebel story to share, I'd love to hear from you. Please reach out through our social media channels or email, and let's keep the conversation going. Email us on podcast@retirementrebel.co.uk. And remember, if you found value in our time together today, consider sharing this episode with a friend who might also enjoy and benefit from our Retirement Rebel community. Spreading the word helps us grow and continue to challenge the narrative around life after 60. All of our details can be found on retirementrebel.co.uk. Retirement Rebel Life After 60 is written and hosted by me, Siobhan Daniels, and produced by the incredibly talented Matt Cheney. Join me again next week for another episode. Until then, keep embracing your inner rebel and living life to the fullest. Bye for now.